happened! It happened!
I can't believe it. I can't believe it.
The tale of George Foreman is the journey of two men who share the same name. A story of personal turmoil to reinvention and redemption. A genuine puncher from the old times who proved that the smaller they are, the harder they fall. From the scourge of the heavyweight division to the sporting world's jolly Santa Claus, a Hollywood-worthy epic of perhaps the most captivating life story of any athlete in history. Rainy Day Boxing brings you George Foreman, a boxing legend.
Beg your pardon?
You would continue boxing even if you would lose over there.
I beg your pardon?
You don't think about losing?
No.
I've seen pictures of him in his prime. He's picking up a full-grown cow.
I am the danger. I'm the one to be afraid of, definitely. I'm the one who can hit you and knock you unconscious.
You hit Joe Frazier, and he was actually off the floor. I mean, both feet. Can you imagine lifting somebody up in the air with one punch?
Foreman hitting the heavy bag is one of the more prodigious sights I've had in my life. Of all the people I've seen hitting heavy bags, including Sonny Liston, no one ever hit it the way Foreman did.
Foreman would hit this bag. Sadler had just literally been picked off his feet.
He thought that the best way to deal with the world was just to become a monster. Beneath it was always that softness that he was trying to hide.
It was years before I could really look in the mirror and say, I'm who I want to be.
Veteran boxer George Foreman will put on the gloves and climb back into the ring after almost a decade in retirement.
Fact is, the clock will not go back.
That is not a fact, what you're saying. The fact is, I can become heavyweight champion of the world if I want to at any age.
A man may as well be dead without a dream. You cannot live at the urging of other people.
Born January 10, 1949, George Foreman was raised in Houston's most violent district, the Fifth Ward, better known as the Bloody Fifth. Being from that environment, the young George had to suppress his natural teddy bear self and display a more grisly exterior. A naturally large child, he thrived on the respect that his imposing physique would command, and he used his size to become a mugger of high prominence. George was a byproduct of a place where despair permeated through the air, and his life was heading nowhere, and fast.
His reputation was not just in the Fifth Ward. He had a reputation all over the city. He was known as a mugger. He was known as a mean guy.
One night, as I was doing my normal stealing, the police started chasing us. When the crooks are being pursued, the police go get the dogs, and the dogs sniffed them out. And as they got closer, and I saw a house, it was the smallest hole I'd ever seen, but I crawled underneath that house. This slop under the house, I covered myself from head to toe with just mud and dirt. So I crawled from underneath that house hours later. The police didn't get me, and I said, I'm not stealing anymore. I gotta do something with my life.
The 17-year-old thug was issued a dare by those he victimized to take up boxing, to determine if he was as tough as he claimed. His attempt at boxing would not expose him as a pretender, but would uncover God-given punching power that very few men have ever possessed.
Wilson sags and goes down from a thundering right hand.
After only 2 years of boxing, George was selected for the 1968 Olympic Games, where he bulldozed his way through every challenger.
What a fight he is waging! Oh, the Russian is being beaten all over the ring. He appears to this reporter to have had enough. Referee stops contest. George Foreman is the winner of the gold medal in the heavyweight competition.
The young miscreant had risen from the dirt of the Fifth Ward to the highest point of the Olympic podium, draped in gold. George had realized his first ever dream, and it would instill in him an indelible belief in himself, that he could exceed in all things that others expected of him. Unlike so many who, when they finally arrive in the spotlight, try to project a positive image of themselves, George went a different route and adopted a new, sinister persona.
When I first met him, he was young and he was nice. Within a year or so, he became one of the most surly people. I later learned that he was mimicking his great idol, Sonny Liston.
I met Sonny Liston. He became my role model. He had to be the most angry fella I'd met. He'd look right through you. And he wasn't putting on being mean. He was just not the nicest fella you'd meet. And I said, if that's the way you have to be heavyweight champ of the world, I'm gonna be that. He was mean. I even took it a little further.
Equipped with a menacing scowl and a hostile mindset, the wrecking ball that was George Foreman was unleashed on the heavyweight division. Fighters who had never exhibited caution before now fought fearfully as a man with cement fists and an uncontrollable desire to inflict pain sought after them. Tossing 200-pound men around with ease, Foreman bludgeoned his foes into submission with a blunt, sledgehammer-like jab. A manifestation of violence who needed not win by attrition, Foreman turned his opponent's bones to powder minutes into the fight.
He had that determined look where he wanted to get on with it and get it over with and end the fights as quickly as possible. Don't waste any time, just do it.
That's it, end the fight.
There can be no question that George Foreman is possessed of extraordinary punching power. So young, so strong, so fearless, he does away with his opponents one after another.
Yeah, I fight any of them monkeys, any of them. Whatever you question, well, I fight any of them.
Foreman is the strongest man I have ever been in a ring with, and in my opinion, he has got to be the most awesome physical specimen that has ever been in the heavyweight division.
Oh, there it is, the right uppercut. Winner, George Foreman.
George was, in every sense of the word, a crowd pleaser. Yet the audience's cheers always eluded him. The crowd would instead greet him with consistent boos that would haunt and trouble the mind of a young Foreman.
And signing now, we have Joe Frazier, the champion, and on the other side, the #1 contender, Mr. George Foreman.
And I want all the people in the country and in all parts of the world to come out and see this fight. And I don't think you'll be interested in come out and see two friends shake hands. Joe Frazier and me will declare war on that day.
Here's the challenger for the heavyweight title, Big George Foreman. He's 6'4" and has a reach of 78.5 inches.
The 23-year-old had amassed a magnificent undefeated record with 37 victories, 34 by knockout. Twisting and turning his foe, George knew exactly how to keep the champion off balance. As swift leather crashed upon Frazier's face, it didn't take long for commentator Howard Cosell to utter those famous words.
Down goes Frazier! Down goes Frazier! And Foreman is as poised as can be! Foreman is going about his job! Down again! Foreman is all over Joe Frazier! Frazier is down again! Frazier's knees buckled! He is down!
After the fourth knockdown, I told him, he better stop it because I'd kill him.
He has Frazier in the corner. There he goes. The fight is stopped. George Foreman is the heavyweight champion of the world.
For some fighters, the fame and respect that comes with holding a world title only helps to stabilize their emotions. For George, who was struggling to find a sense of moral direction, the championship further corrupted his mental state. George was still resisting his softer side, but deep down, he would love to have been easygoing and in control of his temper. But Foreman was addicted to being a figure that intimidated his peers, an addiction that he developed in his teen years, and one that fed his confidence and self-identity, but one that he was deeply ashamed of. Feeding on the fear that his status as champion instilled into the public, George soon became the man that people loved to hate.
After the fight, there was a huge press conference, and he said, "Nobody talks unless you get my permission. I'm the champion now."
People booed me, and it was great because they were booing the right guy. I was a bad fella because I did some things to people I'm ashamed of to this day.
I remember a press conference where somebody asked him a question, and George said, "I'll answer that outside if you have the courage to step outside."
Waiting in the wings was the division's newest sensation, Ken Norton, fresh off a victory where he broke the jaw of Muhammad Ali.
You know what a steamroll is? Well, I like to get a steamroller, lay Ken Norton down, and run over and mash him flat.
Norton is a bit stunned as Foreman is teeing off. A right uppercut, a left jab, and a vicious left. Sends Norton crumbling to the canvas for the second time. Norton is in Queersville. He doesn't know where he is. And it is all over. George Foreman retains the heavyweight championship.
Ali versus Foreman, the rumble in the jungle. At the peak of his complacency, George agreed to defend his title against Ali in Zaire, Africa, for $5 million. He arrived in hostile territory as the people were very much rooting for his opponent. Already feeling aggrieved by the nation's opposition towards him, Ali's incessant taunts supplemented his already cloudy judgment. With no inhibitions and a total dependency on his power, Foreman threw punches with all the force he could generate. The trap was set, and George fell into it.
Foreman wailing away. His punches are not doing any damage, though. Muhammad is allowing Foreman to come in on him, inviting him in and counter-punching, talking to him. Ali looks like he's trying to rest in this round, but Ali continues to talk to Foreman. Straight left hand on the chin of George Foreman.
Do you think Foreman is in that bad a shape? No, I think he's fighting fool. What he's doing, he's using the old pro skill on him, George. George falling for it. I got a feeling that George not going to make it.
Ali working to the head of George Foreman. Another sneaky right hand. Foreman gets up to the knee. That's it. The fight is stopped. Muhammad Ali, a dramatic 8th-round knockout.
Look at that sad, dejected head. The man who can scarcely believe what has happened to him. There he goes. No one in the auditorium paying any attention to him. Nobody wants to mob a beaten champion.
George now had to live with the embarrassment of not only being defeated, but having been bamboozled in front of the whole world. From people being in awe of his presence, to garnering only pity from those who saw him. Stripped of his bravado, a mental breakdown began to take place.
It's a hard thing to live with, losing something like the championship of the world. I'd have to fight that fight most nights, and I'd be winning. Then I get knocked down, and by the time I jump up, I wake up out of the dream again. I could not win that fight, not even in my dreams.
This time, this man has gotten me to the point where I just taste his presence in boxing. I really want to beat him. More than anything in the world, I want to beat him. I want them to be behind me and be a fan and hope that the public will demand that I fight this man again.
Longing to have the public's respect again, George agreed to an event which would have him fight 5 men in one night, a bizarre promotion that did nothing to heal his heart.
Former heavyweight champion of the world, George Foreman. Here is the introduction of George Foreman. He is not popularly received, as you can hear. Ali has created, sitting here to my right, a carnival atmosphere in the arena. Even those closest to George Foreman have been concerned about the fact he's not been the same man ever since Ali beat him. Referee Harry Davis has stopped the fight. What is happening there? Foreman is not himself. He's going after the kid again, needlessly, for no reason. He is beaten him. This is an absurd scene. You see, you hear the fan reaction to George Foreman.
George is punching on his trainer now. Getting punchy. I don't know what's wrong with it.
In desperate trouble, the left floored him. They've started fighting again. The referee off in the corner with the handler. I told you this is the weirdest occasion you'll ever want to see. Now there's going to be a fight between the trainers. Now there's nothing but mayhem in the ring, the thing totally out of control. And George Foreman is walking around the center of the ring, looking at the fans who are booing him.
No way that powder puff, low down, good for nothing, loud mouth, Mohammed, whatever you call his name, can beat no George Foreman. How can you be a champion and live up against the rope? Man, I'm through talking.
The dispirited Foreman made a second run at the title, but he no longer inspired the same fear in his opponents and his vulnerabilities were plain to see. His aspirations came abruptly to an end when, on a blistering night in Puerto Rico, a little-known underdog handed Foreman the second loss of his career. Exhausted and dehydrated, George made his way to his dressing room, where he would soon lose consciousness and find himself in a state of complete misery.
All of my life went out of me. My leg gave out of me, and I was in this deep, dark place, like a dump yard of every sad thought I'd ever had in my life.
There was a horrible smell that go along with it that I've never forgotten to this day.
And I know this place was hell, but I said, I don't care. If this is death, I still believe in God. When I said that I was rescued out of this place, I was in a dressing room. They looked at me, and I started screaming and haven't stopped since. Jesus Christ is coming alive in me.
Through heat prostration, George heard the message that God felt he needed to hear, and it brought about a change in his life that needed to happen. Fans were in disbelief when the 28-year-old announced his retirement from boxing. It was thought that this supposed awakening would be short-lived, but Foreman's conviction to his faith would prove to be undeniable. George would commit the following 10 years of his life to the church as an evangelist and gave away all his earthly possessions. The gentle giant had been set free from the prison that was his surly public persona.
This is the proof that I was in the fight with him. He punched me right on the eye. In the world, I actually hated him. And today, I talk with him all the time. I love him now. Now I can understand how another man would ball up his fist and put on gloves and try to knock another man unconscious. I just can't see it. I don't understand how I did it. I couldn't do that again.
By 1987, Foreman was devoting most of his time to a youth and community center that he had founded, dedicating what was left from his career earnings into this youth center until his savings were all but dried up. In need of funds, George returned to the profession he knew best. This time, he'd be entering the ring for the right reasons, and he'd be doing it as his true self.
I made an announcement to my friends I was coming back. The newspaper got a hold of it, and they started talking about me as bad as they could.
George Foreman's chance of winning aren't slim and none, they're fat and none.
One of the fighters takes that description, heavyweight, very seriously.
Now he's conning himself. He cannot separate the fantasy and the reality.
Every reporter would take a shot at me. He'll never do it. And they just take up the paper criticizing me. At the same time, they were making me all famous again.
Would you welcome George Foreman?
I don't like losing that weight anymore. I like being the biggest guy in the ring. It's like telling a lion to lose weight to fight a house cat, you know?
Yeah, you got a point there.
George, there's a rumor that you weigh 280 pounds when you went into training.
That's a lie. I was only 279.
But you look good. You look great.
You only saying that because it's true.
If I throw and miss you with my left, boom. Miss you with my right, boom. Now belly pump you.
No longer the glowering hedonist, George Foreman had become the smiling preacher man who viewers couldn't help but love. This new affable personality was a reincarnation of Muhammad Ali's charisma, and the crowds greeted the announcement of his name with outpours of affection. For 10 years, the division's most frightening force lay dormant, and his power was now coupled with wisdom, an unstoppable marriage that the new generation of boxers weren't ready for.
Oh, what a right hand. Oh, that'll do it. Clean right hand.
George Foreman, after all these years, still acts as though he's the boss in the ring. He just sort of presents himself there and said, this is my place.
Jameson does not know where he is right now.
You're watching a man who has been known to knock opponents out with glancing blows. His hands are so heavy that what becomes a knockout punch doesn't always look like one, and Rodriguez goes down.
Foreman fights can be explosive. Look at him with arms like tree trunks.
Oh, and look at the left. Come up and slice it up. And Jerry Cooney's in big trouble. He's ready to go. And there he goes. Oh, and that's it. And this fight's over.
Because I'm getting tired of people running from me in the ring. Mike Tyson, Holyfield, you a bunch of bums. Stand up and be a man and fight a real fighter. That was pretty good, wasn't it?
Foreman was once again a bona fide contender, and his dream was now America's dream. The promotional force that was Big George was a gold mine for the sport, and it would be hard put to find another fighter whose celebrity had swelled to such heights.
George Foreman has become the undisputed champion of the Big Cell. In boxing, no one is bigger, more admired, or more in demand.
Who taught you kids how to eat like this?
Dad. George is natural. George loves people. George loves kids, and his heart pours out to them.
No one had rung the publicity drum as relentlessly as George had. So despite his critics' constant skepticism, every other fighter was begging for the payday that a Foreman matchup would bring them. One fighter who thought the old man would be easy pickings was the undisputed world champion, Evander Holyfield.
Right hand on the surface of Holyfield's head, and he's momentarily stunned. Send a left to the jaw and turns things around again. Another left hook and a right. Will George go down? When Evander stops punching, George gets a chance, and he's making the most of it right now.
George caught me one time in that fight, and I thought he knocked all my teeth out. And I go back to the corner, I said, did he knock all my teeth out?
Refusing to back away from the division's toe-to-toe king, Foreman showed little effect from the beating he was taking, and he made sure to give the champion a taste of his face-numbing power. The decision didn't go his way, but any thought of his return being a farce had come to an end.
I still would like to be heavyweight champ of the world. I didn't come back for a decent payday. I came back for the heavyweight title. Knock me on the floor, beat me up, then I'll quit. And if you can't do that, I'll be here.
George's immense marketability was attracting him million-dollar sponsors and endorsements. He had become so preoccupied with public appearances, commercials, and even his own television show that his boxing career had become secondary. His ability seemed to be eroding round by round. Pressure for him to retire began piling up.
Taking a lot of punishment this round. I haven't seen George take this much punishment in any fight in a long, long time.
He's taking a lot more punishment here than he has in any fight in the comeback, and the time may be running out on the second career of Big George Foreman.
George, you've thrilled us. You've been great. You've inspired us. You've entertained us. But now, please, isn't it time to go back to the old fishing hole before you seriously get hurt?
You know, I really resent the fact that people keep asking me, when are you going to quit? How many fights are you going to have? I leave boxing when I want to. The main thing in the world is not to let anyone dictate my life. I've gotten into the ring with guys, and I've seen them turn their back and run. I mean, literally turn their backs on me and run. I'm not going to call that a victory over me. You knock me down. You whip me, I'll quit. If someone's whipped me, someone knocked me down, I'm never going to fight again.
With the fall of Evander Holyfield, a new champion had emerged, one who would be bold enough to try to knock the old man out. Now, 45 years of age, George was battling Father Time itself. The youngster hunted for the finish and unloaded volley after volley. But Foreman knew he no longer had the speed necessary to launch an effective retaliation. To lull his opponent to sleep, George refrained from letting his right hand go with full force, in hopes that the champion would feel comfortable enough to fight in the pocket, to the point where he no longer felt the need to hit and move.
I have a sense here that Moore feels as though he has felt Foreman's power and it's not going to hurt him. I thought that he would fight cautiously and work for a decision, but he now looks to me as though he thinks he's going to be able to knock Foreman out, and he thinks he'll do it by standing in front of him and trading shots. That could be a big mistake.
For 10 rounds, Michael Moorer had been gaining the false sense of security that he could absorb the slow and powerless right crosses that Foreman had been releasing. It was now George who played the role of the deceiver. The trap was set, and Moorer fell into it.
Down goes Moore on a right hand. An unbelievably close-in right hand shot. It happened. It happened.
I can't believe it.
As referee waved his arms over Moore, George Foreman knelt in prayer in the neutral corner.
Foreman had regained the title which he had lost 20 years earlier. An unprecedented feat not only in boxing, but in sporting history. It was the perfect ending to the fairy tale story, that was George Foreman's career. George earned over $300 million, enough to finance his community center 1,000 times over. And to this day, the building stands, offering refuge to all the youth who look to better themselves. Foreman's success is not measured by his riches, but by the growth of his character. Fiercely fighting off anyone who tried to dictate how he should live his life, George accomplished every goal he had ever set out to achieve. But more importantly, he found himself along the way.
I believe George is the most underappreciated heavyweight of all time for one reason. He won the legitimate heavyweight championship of the world 20 years apart as two different fighters and two entirely different human beings.
First half of his career, tried desperately to be Sonny Liston. In the second half, he tried to be Muhammad Ali, and somehow he pulled them both off.
I thought he needed love, and I thought he had to find himself. And he did that. He exhibited such human qualities when the second George Foreman emerged that the first George Foreman was really forgotten.
I like the idea of being remembered as a boxer, but I think 20 years from today when people look back, I want them to remember that George Foreman was not afraid to pursue life and ready to conquer the world. George Foreman came, he saw, he conquered.